ghosts real? I'm Robert Joe, and you're about to find out.
Right now. I wouldn't go in there. Starts now.
Someone hired my friend and me to dig for antique porcelain. We were digging for less than half an hour. I glanced up and saw a very big figure dressed all in white. I knew he was definitely not human.
I love stories like this. Ghost stories.
A lot of torture places, a lot of people die there. We heard a voice.
About places we're not supposed to go. We're warned not to go. But I'm no ghost hunter. The fear, superstition, always hides a bigger story. A true story. What really happened here? And if you knew, would you still go there? I'm Robert Joe, blogger and urban explorer. I'd heard about some strange sightings in Thailand's ancient capital, Ayutthaya. I don't believe in ghosts. My theory is places that attract large numbers of paranormal sightings often have something in common. A true horror or tragedy that took place there, buried somewhere in its past. Thailand, it seemed, was a country that loved ghost stories. Its TV shows, magazines, and movies were proof of an eerie fascination.
An archaeologist sighted an ancient soldier ghost at the Ayutthaya Historical Park on the way home after work.
There were many such stories like this. One in particular caught my attention.
When I was about 16 years old, someone hired my friend and me to dig for antique porcelain. We did it to get some cash so we could go out. 30 years ago, it was normal for people to make extra money by digging up antiques. It was dark around 8 p.m. when we went behind the pavilion. It was overgrown with bushes and deadly silent. It was eerie. There were holes where people have already been digging. We each chose a hole and put a candle in it to try to hide the light from passers-by. We were digging for less than half an hour. A police patrol truck came around. They were patrolling for looters. I climbed up a big tree. After a while, the police left, so I decided to get down from the tree. Before I got down, I glanced up and saw a very big figure dressed all in white. He was already staring at me, waiting for me to look up. I knew that he was definitely not human. A spirit that must have haunted that place.
Deng's story was like a lot of the ghost stories here. They centered around people digging for valuable antiques, treasure, and gold. His ghost story came from an area near what would have been a palace of Ayutthaya's kings, It was now a historical park. Ayutthaya today looked like it had succumbed to urban sprawl. But from the 14th to the 18th century, it was one of the most powerful cities in Southeast Asia. Then in 1767, Thailand's neighbors, the Burmese, invaded Ayutthaya, ransacking and burning the city to the ground. I went to explore this ancient part of the city where Deng was digging for treasure and claimed he saw a ghost in a tree. I started at a pavilion that was a sort of entry point into the ancient ruins.
Okay, this is the Primuk Pavilion. This is the area where my first witness, Deng, apparently had his sighting. So, logically, if you were here doing something shady, which I think Deng was, probably want to get away from the main road. I imagine he was digging around here somewhere. Let's go take a look. Okay. This is one of the ruins that you see everywhere on this complex. I don't know if they're connected. God, what could this have been? Multiple chambers. Perhaps columns or statues were here at some point. And you can tell they've been here for a while, but apparently all of this used to be jungle some 20, 30 years ago. You do see a patch of trees over that way. Okay, this is the Royal Palace. That explains the size of this place. Let's try IR. Storms are brewing. Hopefully this rain won't overtake me as I keep looking. Okay. So originally I was wondering why he was searching in the ruins for treasure, but now that I know that this is an old palace area, it makes a lot more sense. Okay, so imagine you're here doing something shady and the police are coming at you. The only thing you can think to do is to climb up maybe this tree right here. He was in a hurry. He wouldn't have been able to get up a very difficult tree. He just hugged this tree in total darkness. So then Deng waits out the police, and perhaps he thinks they're gone, and he casually looks up as he sees a figure there. He immediately thinks it's a ghost, an old white-robed man, and he freaks out and he runs away. Okay, so maybe that happened, or possibly it was just another treasure hunter doing the exact same thing that Deng did.
Deng believed he saw a ghost in a tree in Ayutthaya's abandoned palace complex. I found another paranormal witness who said she had encountered a ghost in these same ruins.
One day, when I was about 10 years old, my dad was scouting for a way to open the hidden chamber of Ratchaburanat temple. It was dilapidated and was overgrown by vegetation. Nobody would be brave enough to enter that place. Sometimes people would hear a wail from inside. My dad asked my mom to accompany him, so I went along with them. He went to look for a crypt, and I waited while my mother picked vegetables. The sun was nearly setting. I was playing with my brother when all of a sudden the wind hit my face 3 times. It was very cold in an odd way. I could feel that something unusual was close by. His skin was green. His hair was really long. He was gigantic and looked terrifying. I was horrified, so I cried. He looked at us with his red eyes. He walked past us and disappeared into the pagoda. I knew that he wasn't human. He must have been a ghost. I called out for Mother to help. Mom, help me!
I now had two sightings of ghosts among the ruins of ancient Ayutthaya. Laiyad's encounter at Ratchaburana Temple and Dang's near the King's Palace. Both places were considered sacred by the locals. Perhaps they were already expecting some retribution for trespassing. I sought help from an anthropologist who explained the different kinds of spirits that some Thais believe in.
So tell me about the Thai belief in ghosts.
ผีคืออะไรคือวิญญาณที่ออกจากร่างกายของคนที่ตายไป
A ghost is a spirit that leaves a dead body. They call those เปรต
เมื่อคนตายไปแล้วยมบาล
When
ตัดสิน
people die, Yama, the ruler of the dead, will judge them. Once Yama judges what they did wrong, he will punish them.
Are there any other kind of Thai ghosts?
ที่จริงแล้วนี่นะ
In fact, there are many kinds of ghosts or เปรต
อันนี้เปรตในนี้ก็คือ
This kind of เปรต has a very tall figure, long hands, like they've never had any food at all.
ข้าวมาก่อนเลยตัวนี้ก็คือเปรต
This is also a kind of เปรต. Maybe it created bad karma by stealing from people. As punishment, in the afterlife, its head is cut off.
So I have two stories, one involving a guy who was searching for porcelain treasure and he saw some old man. Then a woman whose father was searching for treasure near a temple and she saw some sort of green-skinned ghost. Do those sound familiar to you at all?
ที่ฟังมาสองเรื่อง
The ghosts in the two stories could be people who have a lot of treasure and care so much about his treasure.
ตายไปแล้วไม่ไปไหน
After he is dead, he won't go anywhere. The spirit will just guard there. Thais call them treasure protector ghost. He appears to warn people not to touch my possessions. Sometimes they stay for 100 or 200 years just to guard the treasure.
So how do Thai people see these treasure protector ghosts?
บางทีอาจจะ
Sometimes they come in the form of an old man, or sometimes they walk past people to show themselves.
Laiyad and Deng's apparitions sure sounded like these treasure protector ghosts. My question was, what treasure were these ghosts supposed to be protecting? I was in Ayutthaya, Thailand, investigating some reported hauntings in the city's ancient ruins. I discovered that the ghost sightings could be related to buried treasure. I connected with a Thai historian, Dr. Charnwit Kasetsuri, to get some insight into why buried treasure seemed to be everywhere in Ayutthaya.
I keep coming across stories of treasure here in Ayutthaya, royal palace buried treasure. Why do these kind of stories keep popping up here?
Before the fall of Ayutthaya, the city was surrounded by the Burmese for some years. My guess is that the palace people and including the temple will be hiding their treasure underground. People started to come back to dig it up for the last 200 years.
Why is there so much treasure here?
Ayutthaya grew rich over 400 years. It became one of a very important international port of Southeast Asia.
So there was 400 years worth of treasure scattered in the city.
I would say so, yeah.
Dr. Charnwood explained that between the 14th to 18th century, there was a succession of absolute monarchies.
How did Ayutthaya amass so many riches?
It's from trade and tax. Trade meaning the king himself monopolized export, import, and tax. They would be taxing from the local population either tax in kind or money. Ayutthaya also gained a lot from war. In traditional warfare, there's looting going on all the time. Gold would be the main target in looting.
Dr. Charnwood took me to the sanctuary of Pramong Konbopit. It gave me a feel for what Ayutthaya must have been like in the glory days.
So we're looking at a big gold Buddha. Is this pretty indicative of the wealth of Ayutthaya?
This is a kind of indication that how wealthy Ayutthaya was to build such a big image like this.
And how much gold would it take to build something like this?
In some cases, there would be something like 100 kilogram of gold.
Behind me in that temple is one of the biggest Buddhas I've ever seen, especially considering it's gilded. In fact, from the doorway, all you can see is his lap. And it's just kind of indicative of just how much wealth the kings of Ayutthaya managed to amass centuries ago through trade and plunder.
People seem to believe that there was gold and treasures everywhere here. And for 200 years, since the fall of Ayutthaya, people had been digging for porcelain relics, gold, and jewels. At the same time, many also believed the treasure was guarded by protective spirits. This explained Laiyed's and Dang's ghost sightings. But I sensed there was more to this story than these ghosts. I tracked down my first witness, Dang.
Do you still dig for treasure?
I stopped digging 30 years ago.
So you think these treasures are haunted or protected somehow?
Treasure is cursed. People will bury it with treasure so that spirits could protect it in the afterlife.
So is it dangerous to go treasure hunting like that? Do people still do it?
It is dangerous. Diggers must know some spells to take treasure out safely. But people still do it because there is still hidden treasure inside some temples.
I noticed around here there are other antique treasures for sale. Is this pretty common?
Yes, that's right. Ayutthaya is a town of antiques. In the past, Ayutthaya was a trading center for people from other countries. Gold, diamonds, jewels, and amulets could all be found here.
So what are the differences with these amulets? What are they meant to do?
There are many kinds of amulets. Some are to protect people from harm. Some are to promote a business or to charm other people. This one is very good at protecting people from ghosts and demons.
So looking around this market, I can't tell what's junk and what's treasure. And the amulet sellers and treasure hunters are in some sort of symbiosis where the amulet sellers have nothing to sell without the treasure hunters, and the treasure hunters need the amulets to protect them from what they believe is cursed treasure.
This story is not simply about guardian ghosts. Many also believe some of the treasure was protected by magical curses. Yet, in spite of this, some still went out in search of Ayutthaya's treasures.
Do you know Treasure Diving Village? Treasure Diving Village? That way? Oh.
The last of Ayutthaya's treasure hunters were searching for porcelain and gold on the Chao Phraya and Pasak River that ran through the city. Their methods looked as old as the treasure they were hunting for. The head of the group, Choi, agreed to show me how they searched. The The divers improvised with a steel bucket for a helmet and a plastic tube attached to an air pump on deck.
I noticed your son was praying before he dived. What was he praying for?
It's a tradition. We must pray to guidance spirits and ghosts for protection. At the end, we ask for a lucky break.
So your son was praying for protection. Is this a dangerous job?
Yes, it's very dangerous. People say there are ghosts and mermaids down there.
How dangerous does it get? Do people actually die doing this?
Yes, they do. Accidents underwater have caused about 10 deaths.
Do you believe the treasure is cursed?
I've heard people stole the king's treasure. Those sacred items may be cursed. If we commoners play around with that treasure, it can actually make people go crazy.
I kept hearing about cursed treasure, but today was the first mention I've heard of king's treasure. So I'm going to look more into whatever this king's treasure is supposed to be.
My investigation had taken a turn from stories about ghosts protecting buried treasure to a story about a king's treasure being cursed. I don't believe in curses any more than ghosts, but I needed to know why many here did.
Those sacred items may be cursed.
Was it linked to some fate that befell one of Ayuthya's kings? I'd arrived at the local archives to find out where the king's treasure had been kept and what had happened to it. I searched, but the history books were mostly in Thai. Dr. Tirawat Napompet was at hand to help.
So what am I looking at here?
Oh, this is the Royal Chronicles of the Kingdom of Ayutthaya. I'll read to you a little bit from this chronicle. เจ้ายี่พญาเมืองแพรกศรีราชาเจ้าสามพญากินเมืองชัยนาท which basically is that the king divided the rule over his kingdom with his sons, and he sent all three of them to areas outside Ayutthaya to rule, and then he died.
The king had ruled the city in the 15th century, but his death left a power vacuum and triggered a battle.
The two eldest princes came rushing into Ayutthaya to contest the royal succession.
Oh, that's very Shakespearean.
Very Shakespearean, yes. And in a very Siamese twist to it, the two eldest princes fought on elephant back. Prince number 1 and Prince number 2 killed each other. So all the officials invited the third prince to take the throne. After Chao Sampaya, the new king, had cremated the bodies of his two brothers, he built Wat Rajaburana, and he also had built Pra Mahathat. And Mahathat means the great relic. So the great relic is usually of the Lord Buddha. And if you have the relic of the Buddha, you have to enshrine it in a building. He put Buddha images of gold, of silver. He also included the regalia of the kings of Siam and crown. And then in 1957, we have here some news clippings of the crypt of this place being excavated.
So it was looted about 50 years ago?
Yes. This is the most gold that was ever found in Ayutthaya.
So it turns out it wasn't just any treasure that was at Ratchaburana Temple. It was the king's treasure, almost like the crown jewels being stuck in this temple. And on top of all of that, it was looted. And so I want to look more into what happened there.
The gold hidden in Ratchaburana Temple belonged to a king that had ruled Ayutthaya in the 15th century. Armed with this new information, I needed to investigate the temple. The crypt should offer some clues to what was behind this curse.
This is the Ratchaburana temple. This place used to be 50, 60 years ago, just all jungle. Now it's more of a tourist destination. I think ruin is really the right word for it. I don't know if you can tell right away. These are all Buddha statues. These are the legs in lotus position. I've yet to see a single one that's intact. There are bats flying around all over this place. This is all sort of half renovated. Let's see what this sign says. Okay, this is it. This was where all the king's treasure was hidden. This building here is what's known as the principal praying. And the witness's father came to this place to scope out whether or not he would be able to get inside to loot the king's treasures. All right, let's go take a look.
It was time for me to find out what remained of this king's crypt that many believe was cursed.
In 2011, Ayutthaya suffered from heavy flooding. The water level rose over 3 meters, causing the World Heritage Site to be partially submerged. I wouldn't go in there. Stay tuned to the National Geographic Channel. During the 17th century, Ayutthaya was one of Southeast Asia's greatest cities, with a population of over 1 million. I Wouldn't Go In There continues now on the National Geographic Channel.
I came to Ayutthaya, Thailand, to investigate stories of ghosts protecting buried treasure. But I uncovered a much bigger story, and a much more recent one. In 1957, the King's Crypt in Ratchaburana Temple was looted. The robbers found it filled with gold and jewels from the 15th century. I went to investigate the scene of the crime, a secret chamber in a temple that had remained hidden for 500 years.
Okay, so I'm up on this 3rd floor area here. It's quite cavernous, actually, complete with bats flying around. You can even smell the back guano. Kind of smells like chocolate. Let's take a look inside. So according to this sign, they think more than 100 kilograms of gold were here to begin with, and only about 1/10 of that was recovered. So the rest is still floating around somewhere out there. There are other floors down here. Looks like this is the lower level. There's murals all over these walls. That looks like Chinese people. Ayutthaya was a big center of trade between the East and West. It makes sense. Maybe that's a depiction of a merchant. All right. You can see more holes. There's a lower level. Let's get down there. So this is the end of the line. Oh my God, it's sweltering in here. And as you can hear, it's just echoing all around. Okay, so this is the furthest chamber I can get to, but apparently there's one below me and the ones above me. All of this, imagine being filled with gold and treasure. So this is exactly the type of place that would have this sort of ghost or spirit that is a protector. On top of that, it would be a king's treasure, so this is a type of place that would be cursed.
The treasure was undisturbed until 1957, when a group of local looters, in spite of rumors of ghosts and curses, broke into the king's crypt and made off with the gold. But there were rumors that these looters all met with horrible, tragic fates. That would explain the belief in the curse. Was this simply an urban myth? I needed to find out what really happened to those men. Pichea, my local fixer, found someone who knew the details.
So do you have the details of what happened during the looting?
This document is a copy from the National Archives of Thailand. Looting took place on the 27th September 1957. A group of 15 to 20 men dug into a crypt. They shined their light inside and saw gold and gems gleaming. The report says that the first thing they took was a golden sword. They put the sword on a bowl and poured alcohol over it. The men swore that they would not betray each other. And then everyone drank.
So what happened to the gold?
The looters split up the treasure. Some were sold to gold shops in Ayutthaya and Bangkok.
The story I had just heard was the stuff movies were made of. This was the same temple where Laia had encountered a green ghost while her father was looking for a hidden chamber. I wondered if her father had a connection to that legendary gang of looters.
So what was it that made your father go to the temple?
He was looking for treasure. After he returned, he dreamt of the ghost protector telling him, "You must open the hidden chamber, but must not take anything. If anything is taken, I'll curse that person."
So what happened after?
The next day, he gathered about 20 of his friends to dig. I was there on the first day. I brought them water.
This caught me completely by surprise. As she told me her story, I realized her dad didn't just visit the crypt. He was a member of the famous gang of looters.
So how did they prepare for the break-in?
Around midnight, they perform a ceremony to open the hidden chamber. They pledged to the spirits that if anyone betrayed the group, he would suffer misfortune. During the ceremony, there was lightning and thunder. The men entered the crypt to bring up the treasure.
And what happened next?
As soon as everyone saw the gold, they turned against each other.
Do you believe that that gold was cursed?
Yes, I believe so, because it belonged to the king. Anyone who took the treasure would die horribly.
And bad things happened to everyone who took the gold.
One looter named Date dug up another crypt at Grasain Temple. It collapsed on him and he died.
Laia said that because the king's treasure was cursed, some very bad things happened in the aftermath of the robbery. She said one man was crushed to death by a falling stupa. Another gang member was rumored to have gone crazy. And the gold shops used to melt some of the loot burnt down. So people do believe these looters were cursed for digging up the king's treasure. But I'm certain there's more to the story. I found the tale a mix between tragic and fantastical. I knew Thailand had been a devout monarchy for centuries. Its rulers were often seen as god-like kings. If you betrayed the king, you could expect divine retribution. But what really happened to these men, believed to be cursed for looting the king's tomb? Grasain Temple was around 500 years old. It was where Laia said that Jade, one of the 1957 looters, was crushed to death by a falling stupa. The base looked like it was inclined, so maybe it could have fallen.
Do you know if the stupa fell and killed anyone? I spoke with the construction workers, and there's nothing about anyone getting crushed by a stupa falling. I think I have to go deeper and try and get an official word on this. I went to the Grasai temple and I had some questions about the construction. Why is it under construction?
Now we're restoring all of Ayutthaya's remains to fix the worn-out parts after the floods.
It looks like the foundation clearly sank on one side and it was crooked, but then the top was straightened. Did that ever fall off?
No, it never fell.
So you're saying that the stupa never fell and killed anyone or crushed anyone?
No, it has never fallen and crushed anyone.
The temple didn't fall. No death was reported. However Jade died, it wasn't from a falling stupa. Laiyed said another looter went mad after putting on the king's crown. She told me he passed away years ago. But she pointed me towards a family friend, who, like most people in this town, seemed to know about the 1957 looting. Payao Kemnak was a retired artisan working for the Fine Arts Department.
I heard rumors about the one looter who apparently went mad and wore the king's headpiece around and was seen in public. What was that all about?
I knew him because he was a worker renovating the historical park with my father. People said he wore the king's headpiece and danced with the sword, but he was just drunk.
So he wasn't crazy?
I don't think he was insane. He was just addicted to alcohol and drugs.
So what happened to the looters after?
Some were caught and imprisoned. The rest got away because the police lacked evidence.
So I came here to look into the story of the mad looter who crowned himself king, and it turns out he's just someone who would get drunk and do silly things. In this case, he would wear the headpiece of the king that he had looted, which got him into trouble. Doesn't make him crazy, though.
This second looter sounded like he was cursed by his own excesses, rather than by a dead king or some kind of sorcery. One more curse to investigate. Laiyed said the shops in Ayutthaya's market that melted the king's gold had mysteriously burnt down afterwards. I figured some of the shopkeepers in the market district would know what really happened.
There's a lot more you can tell about the age of a building from behind than in front. From here, for instance, you can tell that this building, with all of its mismatched backs and the water level, everything, it's much older by a good decade or two, I think, than this building here. And that's because this is the one that burnt down in the fires.
My fixer, Pichea, knew this neighborhood well.
I was looking for the gold shops that burned down. Oh, there are... So, do you remember where the fire happened? Do you know which of these buildings burned down?
So there had been a fire, some 11 years after the looting. But what really caused the blaze?
This one here we can go to, you think? Okay. Yeah. Do you know about the gold shops that burned down in this neighborhood? Do you know the cause of the fire?
So it was an accident. But what did the merchants believe about the curse?
Do you know if any of the treasures from that temple ended up in this neighborhood? Does anyone from this area think that the fire and then the treasures are related at all? Do you know anyone who's still here who was older during the fire?
He may have known the real cause of the fire.
Ayutthaya takes its name from Ayodhya, a city in India, which means invincible city, and was once called the Venice of the East. I wouldn't go in there. Stay tuned to the National Geographic Channel. 5 out of the 10 highest grossing Thai films in Thai cinema are patriotic films depicting the Ayutthaya Burmese war legends. I Wouldn't Go In There continues now on the National Geographic Channel.
I came to Ayutthaya, Thailand's ancient capital, to investigate a concentration of ghost sightings among ancient ruins. They led me to a larger story, connected to the buried treasure of a 15th century Ayutthaya king. The king's treasure had remained hidden in his crypt for over 500 years, until 1957, when a band of looters broke the crypt's ancient seal and took the king's gold and jewels. Many locals believe, as punishment, the thieves had been cursed. My investigation proved nothing unnatural had happened to the men. There was one more mystery, rumors about a fire that burnt down gold shops that tried to sell the king's gold.
They recommended us to talk to an old guy at this shop right here.
Here, on the right? Sawadee-krap. Do you remember the fire? Were there rumors as to how the fire started at least? I heard that the gold from Ratchaparana temple made its way into this entire neighborhood. Does he know anything about that? Do you personally believe that gold is cursed? Do you think the fire was related at all to this gold from the temple? I've talked to the shopkeepers now, and it's interesting that even the ones who are superstitious don't believe that the fire that took down this building had anything to do with the curse of the king's gold. And it makes sense. If this was a curse, it's a really slow and arbitrary one that took place 10 years after the original looting.
After talking to locals and looking at the official records, I didn't believe any of the stories of the cursed gold stood up. But over 50 years later, some people here still believed in the king's cursed gold. That was unlikely to change for them, no matter what the real explanation. I wanted to see what remained of this king's treasure that had created such a stir. Chao Sampraya Museum houses what was salvaged from Ratchaparana Temple. The museum was keeping what treasures were left under tight security. With the last 200 years of looting going on in this town, it was probably wise.
So I just laid eyes on the king's treasure from Ratchaparana, and it's quite an impressive collection. You can't help shake the feeling that there must have been a lot more. It's well protected. They wouldn't let me take photos in there.
I had one mystery left to solve, and I hoped the museum curator could shed some light.
So how many pieces are there in the museum?
I say only about 1/4 of the gold artifacts from the crypt is here. There was approximately over 100 kilograms of gold.
And where were the rest of the pieces?
Part of it was sold abroad. Another part was in private collections of some people. Some were melted down.
So do you believe the looters were cursed?
I believe that the looters were greedy, robbing the national treasure. They all had to flee from the authorities and were not able to live with their families. I think the curse came from their actions, not from the king's curse. It's punishment for their greed.
Even the museum curator knew about the terrible fates that had befallen the looters. Whatever money they got together after the crime, they would have been hiding from police, there would have been infighting, they probably blew it on things they didn't need. No wonder terrible things happened to them.
In 1782, 15 years after the Burmese destroyed Ayutthaya, the Thai capital moved downriver to Bangkok. The king's treasure remained hidden until 1957, when a band of looters broke the 500-year-old seal on the king's crypt and stole it away. The superstitious believed they were cursed for what they did. But in the end, I found there was an explanation for the stories. Most of it was down to good old-fashioned greed. And now Ayutthaya is protected as a World Heritage Site to help guard against looting ever happening again.
To check out my blog and some exclusive extras, visit iwgit.com.